We are back on the bottom of Yudches Ches Amud Beis. We're learning in memory of Mindel Mariam Bas Kalman Ruvain, her Neshama Shem Aliyah, and we are again bottom of Yudches Amud Beis, 3 lines on the bottom. Tanur bottom. We have a brayso that says as follows: Beishamai Omrim Lo Limkar Adam Chemtzel Nachri Elam Ken Yodea Bo Sheyichle Kodem Pesach. So a person, a different Beishamai holds that a person is not allowed to sell their chametz to a non-Jew anytime before Pesach. In other words, what he's saying is that not only do I have to not have my own chametz in possession, but if I have chametz that I sold to a non-Jew, it used to be mine. Now it belongs to the non-Jew, but since it used to be mine and it's still in existence, I am not allowed to do so. Okay, as long as I'm allowed to eat it, I'm allowed to sell it. So again, until the time of eating, where there's a few zmanim, there's a few different cutoff times on Erev Pesach. One of them is the time you're no longer allowed, you have to burn it, but there's an earlier time where you are allowed to continue eating it. As long as you're allowed to eat it, that's when you could still sell it, and that's what we do. We sell the chametz to a non-Jew that is up to the time of eating. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda says, Kutach habavli v'chomene kutach. Kutach habavli is a type of dip, a unique Babylonian dip, and all type of dips. Asur limkar shloshim yom kodem Pesach. It's forbidden to sell even up to 30 days before Pesach. So what's Rabbi Yehuda adding? Rabbi Yehuda, according to at least many Mefarshim, understand that he is going within the opinion of Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai is the one who said you cannot sell your chametz to a non-Jew. However, we see from here that Yehuda is telling us that it really depends on the type of product. In other words, you can make certain assumptions. Kutach is a dip. A dip, I don't know if you have a dip in your fridge, it takes a while. You usually don't necessarily eat it in 1 week, unless you have a lot of guests or whatever it is, but it takes a while. And so kutach is something which it takes a while to finish, and therefore has to be done 30 days before. Something which would take less time to finish, you could do it a little bit closer to Pesach. The point is that you can make certain assumptions in terms of when the food is able to be done. Kutach is one of many examples where there's an assumption that it takes more than 30 days, and therefore within 30 days you cannot sell kutach to a non-Jew, since he will not finish it, and it'll be your chametz that was still in existence during Pesach. Tanur Bana, we have another brayso. Nostin mizonos v'nakelev v'chatzer. You are allowed to place food in front of a dog in the courtyard. Okay, very important introduction, and that is that it is forbidden to feed animals that are not yours on Shabbos. Not so well known. Unfortunately, people, one of the most practical areas where people mess up on this is on Tashlich. People throw the bread into the water, feeding the fish. It's actually usher to do so. And if you're living here in Baltimore, you do it in our little stream over here. It's probably mutter, since there are only no fish, and if they are, they're mutant. I mean, it's just full of toxins. So there's no real fish. That you could probably throw it into the water over there, but really you cannot feed animals that are not yours on Shabbos. One exception, and that is dogs. Dogs were allowed to do. The Mefarshim explain, the commentators explain that dogs were underfed back in the day. We're not talking about dogs which were owned by people. We're talking about stray dogs, and they were not fed so well, and therefore we have to look out for them, and you're allowed to feed them on Shabbos. That's not the chiddush. The novelty over here is the fact that you're going to feed the dog in your own courtyard, your completely surrounded courtyard, i.e. a Rosh Hashanah, not low. V'yatza enis kakim. Even though the dog may go ahead and take the food and start walking outside your courtyard, you don't have to stop the dog. That's the chiddush. That's the novelty. Okay. Similarly, similarly, you have a non-Jew, a non-Jewish neighbor, a non-Jewish person down the street who's hungry. They come to your courtyard. They come to your yard. You're allowed to give them food. Okay, not leviyatza, enis kakinlo. If they take the food and they go out of your courtyard, you don't have to say, hey, stop, you can't take my food out of the courtyard. It's not a problem. Hasu lamali, ask the Gemara, why do I need this second case? It's really the same, hainu hach, it's the same thing, whether you're putting it in front of an animal or whether you're putting it in front of a person, the same principle. You don't have to stop the person or animal as it leaves your courtyard. So Ma'adatim, I would have said, hi rami aleva, hi la rami aleva. I would have thought that since a person is able to get their own food, they're able to figure it out on their own, right? An animal, they're really stuck, but a person, they can get their own food. Maybe you can't give it to a person. Kamash B'lan, no, you could feed both animals that are dependent, that really are needy, and you could feed people who are really needy, even though they may leave your courtyard. Okay, Tanur Bana, another brayso. Lo yaskir adam kelev l'nachri b'erev Shabbos. A person is not allowed to rent their utensils to a non-Jew on Friday. B'dalad v'hei mutter, on Thursday and on Wednesday, you are allowed to do so, okay? Now, the Gemara over here, who's this going according to? So the Mefarshim explain it's actually even going according to Beis Hillel, right? According to Beis Shammai, you're not allowed, your utensils can't be used by a non-Jew at all on Shabbos, right? That we established earlier. According to Beis Hillel, your utensils could be used even by you. Well, you can't do a malacha on Shabbos, but your utensils could be doing a malacha if you're not doing the malacha. So, for example, according to Beis Hillel, if my utensils are set in motion, that they are going to be doing a malacha on Shabbos, that's not a problem, because he does not hold of shvisas kelim that my utensils have to be resting, whereas Beis Shammai does. Over here, this halacha is going even according to Beis Hillel, and we're learning over here that when it comes to renting something out, meaning taking something for pay, giving it to a non-Jew on Friday, it's too close to Shabbos, and it looks like you're doing business on Shabbos, and therefore you're not allowed to rent out your utensils. You are allowed to lend them, because there's no money being transferred. So if your neighbor knocks on the door and says, hey, I want to borrow your lawnmower, you're allowed to lend it to your neighbor on Friday, but to rent it, it is prohibited. Similarly, you're not allowed to send letters through a non-Jew on Friday. Okay, we're going to explain this over the next couple of lines over here, unpacking this, right? In other words, we're going to have to address the question, is a person allowed to put mail in the mailbox on Friday? Is a person allowed to send a package on Friday? So let's keep on reading. So first it says you're not allowed to do so on Friday, but you're allowed to do so on Wednesday and Thursday. Amru alav al Rav Yossi HaKohen v'amri la al Rav Yossi HaChassid. One of the Rav Yossis, whether it was Rav Yossi HaKohen or Rav Yossi HaChassid, one of those, they said about him, that he never sent any letters. He never sent any letters to a non-Jew. In other words, he was always afraid the non-Jew is going to be traveling, carrying this letter for him on Shabbos and doing malacha for him on Shabbos, and therefore he would never ever send any letters. Even on a Sunday, he would not send letters through a non-Jew. He would always do it through a Jew. Tanar Banan, Brisa, Erev Shabbos. Okay, and this Brisa is the one that we're going to unpack, and we're going to conclude with some practical halachos about sending mail before Shabbos. Erev Shabbos. Okay, so the Brisa first begins by saying you can't send a letter through a non-Jew on Friday. Elam came kotzetz lo damim, unless you give him a set fee. What does that mean? What that means is as follows. There are two ways you pay people. One way, you pay someone by the hour. You do work for me, I pay you, tell me how many hours you worked, I will pay you for that time. The other way to pay someone is you pay someone a flat fee, and no matter how long it takes, they're going to get paid this amount. So the Gemara over here is saying that you're allowed to send a letter you're not allowed to send a letter on Erev Shabbos, period. But if you don't pay the person hourly for doing the work, you just pay the person a flat fee, then you are allowed to do so on Erev Shabbos, because at that point, they're no longer working for you. In other words, the amount of hours they're putting in while they might be doing it on Shabbos, it's no longer about you. It's a set fee. Therefore, they could do it today, they could do it later. They're doing it for themselves, and therefore, with a set fee, it's not a problem. What's a set fee like nowadays? A stamp. You put a stamp on. You don't pay the mailman. If the post, if the USPS truck has 7 flat tires and it takes them 2 days to deliver your mail, you still put the same forever stamp on it. Same still costs the same much. That's kotzetz lo damim. Okay, but then the Brisa continues. Beis Shammai says the non-Jew has to be able to reach his home if you want to send it. The non-Jew has to be able to reach the house closest to the wall of the next city. In other words, we're talking about a non-Jew who's traveling outside of the city, and therefore he's going to be carrying on Shabbos for you. Beis Shammai says he has to be able to reach the house he's supposed to be going to. Beis Hillel says as long as he reaches a house, that's okay. Okay? Ask the Gemara. V'lo katzatz. Right, so the Gemara says, why are we saying this? That according to Beis Shammai, the guy's to reach the house. At the end of the day, the guy gave a flat fee. That's how the Brisa started. The guy gave a flat fee. Why do you care where if he gets this house, that house? Shouldn't matter. Rav Sheshes says, no. We have to reread the Brisa to say as follows. First, the Brisa says you have to make a set fee. Ve'im lo katzatz, if you didn't make a set fee, Beis Shammai omer ma'achigil aveso, if there was no set fee, Beis Shammai says you have to make sure the guy was able to reach the house you're delivering into. Beis Hillel omer ma'achigil aveso samach lechoma, you have to reach the house which is close to the wall. Okay, so again, if it's a flat fee, you could just send it even if he's not going to reach any of the houses. That doesn't matter. If you don't set a set fee, then you have this debate about how far the guy has to reach. And I would just to explain, by the way, Beis Hillel acknowledges that the guy's probably not going to go to the first house. He's probably going to go to the house you sent him to. So why is it allowed? Why is it allowed? Because you are not telling the non-Jew to do something that's forbidden. You are giving him the opportunity to do something which doesn't involve a malacha. In other words, on Friday you're saying, hey, you go to that next city. Theoretically, he could stop at the first house he comes to, and he wouldn't be doing a malacha. Now, it's true, it's very likely he will not be doing that. He's going to go much further, but bottom line is that is permitted. So, a similar example to this is, let's say, and we're going to have many more discussions about Amir Lanachri, telling a non-Jew things to do on Shabbos. Let's say you have someone who's in your house doing some cleaning help on Shabbos, and you say, hey, could you wash the dishes? Now, is washing dishes mutter on Shabbos? Depends. If you wash dishes with cold water and a Shabbos sponge or no sponge, it's mutter. If you do it with a regular sponge and hot water, it's asur, right? So what you're allowed to still tell a non-Jew to wash the dishes since she is able to wash them. Since she is able to wash them in a way that doesn't necessarily involve a malacha, therefore it's permitted, even though it's likely they're going to actually do the malacha. So it's a similar thing over here. Beis Hillel knows the guy's probably not going to stop at the first house, but since you're telling him to do something in a way that at least it's possible he's not going to be over a malacha, he's not going to do something which is prohibited, therefore it's permitted. Okay, one few more lines in this discussion. The Brisa is a little bit strange because it starts off by saying you can't send unless you're kotzetz, and then it says and then you could send. So it's a little bit hard to understand. So Gemara says lo kasha. It depends. If there is beidar, there's different ways of understanding this. We'll understand this to mean a mail house. There's like a postmaster house. In a scenario where there's a postmaster house, then you are allowed to send it then you're allowed to send it. If there's no postmaster house, then you're not allowed to send it at all. Okay. That's Let's stop over here. In other words, what that means is as follows. If there's a postmaster house, then the person who is delivering the mail could just drop it off to the postmaster house and he'll be done with it. If there's no postmaster house, then everyone's going to be concerned. You can't send it unless there is a set fee. Because why? Because if there's no postmaster house where you could drop off the mail, the guy's been walking around all of Shabbos trying to deliver the mail. And again, he's been carrying on Shabbos. So it's only when there's a postmaster house, that's when we're saying if you didn't give a set fee, it's permitted. But if there's no postmaster house, even if you could reach the first house, it's not enough. We need a place where there is a postmaster house. Otherwise, you need to give a set fee. Okay, so again, bottom line, practically speaking, you are allowed to drop off mail in the mailbox Erev Shabbos. What you're not allowed to do, and this is also very relevant, is order on Amazon in a way that it's definitely going to be delivered for you on Shabbos. That would also be usher. What you could do is, as long as it's possible, it's not going to be delivered on Shabbos. So most of the time, it's not an issue. In other words, let's say in a Shabbos like this, Shabbos is over like 8 o'clock, 8:02, right? And Amazon delivers until 10 o'clock. So even if you do one-day delivery, and it's very likely they're going to send it sometime during Shabbos, but at least it's possible that they're going to deliver after Shabbos is over. It's permitted because, again, you didn't force the person to do so. So again, with one-day delivery, you just have to be careful that there's at least a possibility for it to come down on Shabbos, and then it's allowed. You're also allowed to place mail in the mailbox with a set fee, i.e. a stamp. That is all allowed. Okay, another Gemara, another Brisa, which also has some very practical ramifications. You are not allowed to go on a boat less than 3 days before Shabbos. Why not? So there's a bunch of different opinions. I'll just mention one that is very relevant because the Shulchan Aruch rules like all those opinions. One opinion is because you get seasick when you're on a boat and you can't ruin your own Shabbos. So therefore, it is forbidden to do something which is going to cause you to be unwell on Shabbos. Okay, what's another example of this, by the way? An extension, which many say, and that is doing surgery, going to elective surgery that you are able to avoid, or able to schedule on a Sunday, or you could do it on Thursday. You're not allowed to do it on Thursday. Why? Because if it's surgery that's going to cause a couple of days of recovery, you're going to be unwell on Shabbos. Usher. It is forbidden to do so. And therefore, a person not well known, a person says, well, it's great. I'm going to do it on Friday or Thursday, and then I have a half day Friday, I have Shabbos, Sunday, 2 days of recovery. Fantastic. No, you can't do so because you're wrecking your Shabbos. And just like you can't go on a boat 3 days before Shabbos, you also can't do surgery, elective surgery, 3 days before Shabbos. Medvar Murim, Levar Rishus. That's only when it's things which are like, okay, maybe yes, I want to go on a trip. Rishus is like, I'm allowed to. Levar Mitzvah, if I'm doing it for a mitzvah. In other words, I'm, making aliyah. I'm getting on a boat. So I'm going to go help someone. That's when I'm getting on a boat. Shaper dummy, then it's allowed. Okay, and even then, Rebbe says, even if you're doing it for the Var Mitzvah, you have to tell the captain, by the way, I want you to stop on Shabbos. Even though you know he may not stop, that's fine. You have to, lay the law down. Say you have to stop. You don't have to even do so. The last halacha in this traveling brisa, umitzur litzidan afil Erev Shabbos motor, from tzur, sire, I guess, litzidan, two places which are not that far. They're close enough that you could reach them on Erev Shabbos. You're allowed to travel on Erev Shabbos. What the Gemara over here is telling us is that you have these locations. It's possible things will go wrong, but if all goes well, you could go from tzur to tzidan on Erev Shabbos. You're allowed to do so as long as there's enough time that you can make it. You're allowed. The poskim do bring down that it's certainly less than ideal to be traveling on Erev Shabbos. Certainly, as it gets closer to Shabbos, many risks, and you could find yourself in a very compromised situation. And therefore, ideally, a person should not do so. Okay, Tanarbanan. Ein sarin al ayara shel nachrim pachas b'gam yom kodem l'Shabbos. You're not allowed to lay siege on a city 3 days before Shabbos. Why? Same reason, according to at least the last commentator we said, and that is that a person feels queasy. If you ever served in an army, okay, then it's scary when you start the war, right? So the first 3 days you're going to be all queasy, and therefore don't do it. Start on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Don't do it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay. Mischilu, if you did start mafsikin, you don't have to stop. In other words, even if you started illegally, you don't have to stop. And not only, of course, if it's life-threatening once you started, of course you have to continue. But even if it's not life-threatening, you're allowed to continue. Why? Shama used to say, ad ridita. There's a pasuk that speaks about laying siege in Dvarim, and there it says you lay siege ad ridita until you take it to the city down. You take the wall down. Afilu b'Shabbos, teaching us why does it say that extra word? Teach you that you continue the siege even on Shabbos. So now we're going to the last part of the Mishnah that we saw. Beis Shammai disagreed about dropping off laundry at the laundromats before Shabbos, so the cleaners. Beis Shammai says you can drop it off right before Shabbos. Beis Shammai says no, cannot be done unless there's enough time for the person to do the laundry. And then Rav Shimon Gamliel said that his family had a custom, which was clearly influenced by Beis Shammai, where they would drop off white clothing 3 days before Shabbos. Says the Brisa, Tanya Amar Tanya Ben Kachlim and Hagel Shabbos Rabban Gamliel. This was the custom of the house of Rabban Gamliel. Sheinostin Klei Lavan Lechoves Gil Yom Kodem Shabbos. They would give their white clothing 3 days before Shabbos to Tvuhim, their colored clothing Afilu Erev Shabbos, even on Friday. You see from here that white clothing takes a lot longer to clean than color clothing, right? That's why they would give the color clothing Erev Shabbos, even on Friday, with enough time to be cleaned. But the white clothing they do 3 days before, because clearly white clothing takes a lot longer. So the story, the Gemara continues. Abaye one day brought laundry to a laundry person. Amrle, kama Abaye leva. Abaye he says, how much I owe you? Abaye says, how much I have to pay you? Amrle, kirech yura. You have to pay me the same amount you pay me for the white clothing. Amrle, Abaye says, kvar kadmucha rabbanan. The rabbis already beat you to the punch. In other words, they already taught me that white stuff is much harder to clean than colored stuff. Don't charge me the same amount, charge me less, okay? Pays off to pay attention to these mishnayos. Okay, he saved himself some money. Amar Abaye, person who gives money to the cleaners, to a person doing laundry, you should measure it when you give it, measure all the clothing when you take it back. Why is that? Because if it's longer, then he ruined. Then the person who cleaned your clothes ruined it because they stretched it out. Bibatzer, and if it's smaller, afsade to kavatze, and then he made you lose because they shrunk your clothing. In other words, there's a lot of potential issues that could come up when you send something to the laundry, and therefore you want to measure it before you send it to the person because they could easily mess up by stretching it out, by shrinking it, and therefore measure it to know if the person owes you money or not. Okay, let's go a little bit further. Sorry, there's one more line in the Mishnah. The Mishnah told us, and this is where the Gemara discussion is going to take us all the way through. Your Testament base told the Mishnah. The discussion was about the beams on tops of grapes and olives. So the Gemara told us that even though Beis Shammai was machmir, but all these cases you can't do certain things before Shabbos begins. This one case he agrees. What's the case? The case is you have grapes, you have olives that you harvested, and now you want to make oil or you want to make wine or grape juice. So what you do is you take a board and you place it down on top of those things. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree you could do that before Shabbos. Again, Beis Shammai until now has told us you can't allow your utensil. And again, what's going to happen? It's going to keep on pushing it on Shabbos, right? It's a heavy beam, so it's going to keep on crushing on Shabbos. Once you did it once, you're allowed to leave it there. Why? The Gemara is going to ask. Why is it that Beis Shammai was gozer for all those other cases, and here he was not gozer? Answer the Gemara. The other cases, let's say laundry. Beis Shammai says you have to give the laundry over in a way that it could be done before Shabbos. Why? Because laundry is something that if it was done on Shabbos, you have to bring a chatzos. You cannot, doing laundry, cleaning items is prohibited biblically. And therefore, it would have to be given before Shabbos, okay? When it comes to the beams that are placed on top of the grapes, on top of the olives, once you placed it once, then you're no longer going to be in violation of the biblical prohibition. And that's what the Gemara is going to discuss. In other words, at what point, but basically, at least according to this one opinion of our Mishnah, once you crushed it once, which is what you did before Shabbos, then any subsequent crushing would not be in violation of a biblical prohibition, and therefore even Beis Shammai would say, no problem, and he allows the person, once they place the initial board, you're allowed to leave the board, and it's going to be continue doing your crushing of your olives, your grapes on Shabbos. Have a wonderful day, a beautiful Purim, and we will pick up tomorrow. All the best.